The parable of the prodigal son, as it is known, is common. You probably know the story, know all of the ins and outs, and you would appreciate that probably the main message is one of grace, mercy, forgiveness. It is a reminder to us that God is willing to forgive our faults, everything. Sometimes people will get into this notion where they think, well, I have done something in the past that is so awful, God cannot do anything about it. He cannot possibly forgive me. But that's wrong. God will forgive us if we go like the younger son did to the father, and at least in this case, the son tried to apologize. But the father's love was so great that he couldn't even get out the entirety of the apology before the father interrupted him and welcomed him back. That's a lesson. That's something many of us need to hear, need to be reminded of. We don't work our way into heaven. We don't work our way into God's grace. God offers it to us. But since that message is rather known to, I would say, nearly all of you, if you allow me, I would like to look at this parable in a different way and see if there's a different lesson that might be helpful to us. Some people think that parables were given to us as stories that have a single meaning. So this story, the meaning is grace and mercy. But that's not true. Parables are stories intended to be looked at in different ways. The way we just looked at it begins by making an assignment. You say, well, in the story, the Father is God, and the two sons are us, perhaps in different stages of our lives. But if you could for a moment put that aside and look at this as just a story. A dad has two sons, so leave God out of it, if you will. It's just a story. A guy has two sons. Let us look at it that way and see what comes of that approach. It's interesting, the great moment where the younger son returns and the dad offers him this amazing forgiveness. Quite extraordinary for a regular father. But notice what happens next. Dad forgives the kid, welcomes him back, declares him a son again. He wants a party to celebrate, and he orders that a feast should be prepared, and he somehow arranges for music. He hires a band, if you want to put it that way. And he goes to all that trouble, but he does not do anything to inform the older son. He just somehow doesn't do that. You would think that perhaps right in the midst of the rejoicing, Dad would say to one of the servants, oh, go tell my oldest son that his brother has returned. Tell him to come from the field early. We want him to be part of the celebration. But he doesn't do that. If you caught it in the story, the older brother finds out what's going on only when he comes in at the end of the day and has to ask what's going on. And they tell him. And he's upset. And his complaint is that, hey, Dad, I've been around here all the time, and you don't do much of anything for me. But younger brother here who is goofed up, you're throwing this big party. It's maybe the easiest way to put it is simply that it would appear that the dad has taken his older son for granted. It's also interesting, Luke is the only one that has this story in the Gospels. And Luke also, right before it, has two other stories that you may know, the parable of the lost sheep and the parable of the lost coin. Parable of the lost sheep, you remember that? Jesus says, if you had 100 sheep and you lost one, you'd go get the one that was lost. That's true. But what's interesting is in order to find out that you've lost a sheep, you have to count. You can't look at 100 sheep and realize, I think one's missing. You have to count 1, 2, 3. And it's not easy to count moving animals. You would undoubtedly go like 96, 97, 98, 99, 1, 2, 3, 4. It would take you a lot of effort. And the woman who lost one of the coins, same thing, 10 coins, 9 coins, can't really just notice that it's missing. You'd have to exert at least some effort to realize you've lost a coin. The shepherd counts the sheep. The woman counts the coins. Dad doesn't seem to count even to 2. He seems to indeed take his oldest son for granted. And so the question for us is, what are you and I perhaps taking for granted today? Because some of us know what it's like to be taken for granted, and we'd appreciate that's not a good thing. And we would not want to do that to someone else. And so we could today pause to think of people in our lives, whether that's family, friends, coworkers. This week, as I've been reflecting on this, I was thinking about the parish staff here. They're terrific. Most of you don't know them, but they're really quite good. And in fact, they're so good that it's easy to sort of take them for granted. They're just going to get all the work done, and they're going to get it done really well. And so it's important for me to be reminded, at least occasionally, to express some gratitude, to express something that would convey to them that they're not being taken for granted. Certainly, health would be another example. Many of you would have experienced, you're laying in bed and you got this clogged up head. And in that moment, you're just anticipating the moment when you can breathe through 2 nostrils. And you are so grateful when it happens, but then now you're breathing fine. And do we take it for granted? Sure, until another time when we aren't able to do it again. We certainly are likely to take nature for granted. Been a beautiful couple of days, and when you leave here a little bit later, there'll be a beautiful sunset. And maybe you and I, maybe we're just too busy. Well, some of us will be going inside because we want to turn on the basketball game. We wouldn't care about the sunset. We'll just take it for granted. And indeed, the idea of modern conveniences. The young folk here, you can't appreciate this. But for the older folks here, I surely am not the only one that remembers getting up to turn the channel. And so, but now, the remote is there, and if the battery runs dead, we're all in a panic, and because we don't even know how to change the channel on the TV as it is now. But do we not sometimes take all these things for granted? But what are we to do? Because you might appreciate that I have presented you with a really interesting problem. So many things in our lives that we need to remember to not take for granted, but it's too many. The list is too long. You couldn't possibly go through a day trying to be grateful for every last little thing. That wouldn't actually work. And so if I could offer you a suggestion, it would be to allow the Lord to remind you who in that particular moment you need to bring to mind and not take for granted. In other words, you would, in whatever prayer you're doing, pause and say to the Lord, Lord, I don't want to do this. I don't want to take people for granted. And so I need you to bring to my mind now people or things or anything else, and just give me a sense of it. Put it on my radar so that I will be grateful now, and if it's a person, that I will express that to them in the next couple of days. So Lord, help me. And if you and I prayed that prayer often, every couple of days, every week maybe, surely the Lord would put it on our hearts, all these different things, and we would live a life of gratitude. And would that not be a wonderful thing? Because the end of that story is rather sad. The older son, he can't join into this celebration. He's hurt. And why? And he's hurt because of the way things have happened. That it was preventable. And so if we can prevent a rupture in a relationship, or even prevent ourselves from taking for granted something that is material, that would be a wonderful thing. So I commend the idea to you. Let's take it to prayer. Let's ask the Lord to help us be grateful.